After I became pregnant, Michael started going for night runs every evening. Today he left in such a hurry that he only took his Fitbit, forgetting his phone. I accidentally saw several messages between him and his female colleague. Want to come over for dinner? Maybe we can have some fun too. Not really hungry tonight, but I'd love to have a taste of you. That evening, as he spoon-fed me chicken soup, I felt it churning in my stomach. If I remember correctly, he just introduced this colleague to my brother Brian. With trembling hands, I picked up his phone. The password was still my birthday. As I scrolled through their messages, my vision became increasingly blurred. Working in the same office, they chatted from morning till night. Michael complained to her, "I can't even kiss her without makeup anymore. Pregnant women have this smell, it makes me sick." A sharp pain shot through my heart, spreading slowly through my entire body. After confirming my pregnancy, he was the one who eagerly put away all my makeup. He was also the one who would hold me close, inhaling deeply, saying I had that sweet baby smell. The further back I scrolled, the more unbearable the messages became. My fingers were shaking. Going back a month, I found their first time together. The date, it was our wedding anniversary. I remember that day, the cake and flowers he ordered had arrived, but he hadn't. "Honey, there's a last-minute team building event at work. I'll be home late." He even sent me $520 as compensation. He didn't come home until 3 a.m., trying to kiss me with the smell of cigarettes on him. I pushed him away in disgust, but he just smiled and pulled me into his arms. Looking back now, Michael never smoked. The cigarette smell was probably to mask her perfume. During our intimate moment, his phone buzzed with messages. I even reminded him to check. He glanced at it, put it face down by the pillow, and said, "Just jokes in the group chat." Now, seeing the actual content of that message, I feel like such a fool. It was from Jessica. "Still have energy left for your marital duties?" Michael replied to her at dawn, "You doubt my stamina?" I had unwittingly become a part of their sick game. Unimaginable. That morning, he warmed milk for me and brought it to the bedside. Wouldn't let me get up, lovingly making me drink from his hand. Before leaving, he tucked me in and kissed my forehead. "So thoughtful, sleep more, I've left breakfast warming in the pot." We'd been together since college, weathered the 7-year itch. The unexpected pregnancy disrupted our original plans. But Michael didn't hesitate, saying the baby was a gift from heaven. After I got pregnant, he seemed even more devoted than before. Made me believe he was genuinely excited about the baby's arrival. How naive I was. There was one message that felt like a knife to my heart. Michael wrote, "She's already pregnant, I can't say no now, just have to deal with it." He was comfortable cheating, then coming home to play the perfect husband. The nicer he was to me, the less guilty he felt. I went through all their messages, fighting nausea as I took screenshots for evidence. Then a new message popped up, from my brother Brian. "Bro, go easy on Jessica with the workload, will you? She's going to be my wife someday. She's so tired she falls asleep right when she gets home, we barely have time to date." I unconsciously bit my lip. Not long ago, at our family dinner, Michael had enthusiastically introduced Jessica to my brother. That same Jessica who was now his mistress. After a few seconds, Michael replied, "Take her to the movies tomorrow, I'll book the tickets for you." Brian sent several smiley emojis. "Thanks bro, you're the best." Blood rushed to my head, making me dizzy. It wasn't hard to imagine what those two were doing right now. My naive brother had no idea he was being played for a fool in their private messages. My phone suddenly rang. It was Michael. "Honey, did I leave my phone at home?" His breathing was heavy. "Did you?" "I haven't noticed." He seemed relieved. "Why aren't you sleeping yet?" "Go to bed, don't wait up for me." Standing on the balcony, I asked, "Where are you running?" "At the park nearby." I kept my voice steady. "I saw on the morning news they're doing construction there, it's blocked off." He paused briefly, then replied casually, "I just went around it, don't worry about me." The call ended quickly, and I thought I heard a soft laugh in the background. My heart clenched in pain as I gripped the railing, taking a long time to compose myself. Brian was completely smitten with Jessica, constantly talking about marrying her soon. But Jessica had other plans. We'd met a few times at company gatherings. Colleagues called me either Mrs. Thompson or the boss's wife. But Jessica was different, she called me Sarah. Once in the restroom, my legs went numb from crouching too long, and I overheard her conversation with another girl. She spoke about Michael with nothing but praise. Michael is so thoughtful. Why are all the good men taken so young? Then her tone changed, followed by a laugh. No wonder Sarah rushed to have a baby, afraid she couldn't keep him, I guess. The girl quickly shushed her. Don't say that, I heard it was an accidental pregnancy. Jessica giggled. Oh please, that's just what married women do. Michael probably thought the same way. Actually, I wouldn't have suspected so quickly if she hadn't left such obvious clues. 2 weeks ago, Jessica posted a group photo on social media, taken at sunrise after a company hiking trip. In the photo, although there was someone between her and Michael, she was turned sideways, radiating youth, with her brilliant smile. I immediately recognized the oversized men's t-shirt she was wearing. I had bought it for Michael myself. Her long legs and shorts were pale and slender, with 2 telling red marks on her knees that stood out, painfully obvious. I stared at that photo all afternoon, an inexplicable anxiety growing inside me. Once the seed of doubt is planted, it grows wild in your mind. I started noticing Michael's unconscious smiles while texting. His bathroom breaks got longer and longer. Many times, his phone kept receiving messages, always from the contact with that little chick wearing sunglasses avatar. In their chat history, I saw nothing but the ugliness of human nature. Jessica described to Michael every detail of her dates with my brother. She even joked, wouldn't it be fun if I married him? The 4 of us could have dinner together. Michael responded with laughing emojis, seemingly unbothered by this possibility. Jessica was calculating, how about I marry him while carrying your baby? Sarah trapped you, and I'll trap her brother. Michael's response, silly girl. Those 2 words dripped with affection. My whole worldview shattered. Michael thought I deliberately got pregnant, ruining his child-free life plans. After sharing a bed for years, he didn't even bother to ask me about it, just made his own assumptions. I shook my head with bitter amusement. When love reaches its end, there's nothing left to hold on to. 2 months ago, his mother held my hands with tears streaming down her face, begging me. His father's cancer is terminal. His only wish is to have a grandchild. Sarah, forgive me, I only did this because I had no choice. My pregnancy was never an accident. I didn't sleep all night. Near dawn, I saw messages in our family group chat. Michael had specifically asked his mother about the chicken soup yesterday. Now she was tagging him, I made a pot of soup, I'll bring it over later. I got up and went to the living room all silent, he still wasn't home. My heart sank to the bottom. I splashed cold water on my face and called a ride to the hospital. Got in line for the procedure. While waiting for the surgery slot, I added my family members to a new group chat. Brian, on his way to work, sent a confused question mark to the group. The nurse called my name. Before entering the operating room, I dropped all the screenshot evidence into the group chat. As I lay down, the lights were slightly harsh on my eyes. I closed them, feeling strangely peaceful. My hand unconsciously moved to my still, flat stomach. So early, could this tiny life sense this was my goodbye? Tears rolled down the sides of my face onto the pillow. Michael called this baby a gift from heaven, he was trying to fool himself. We had promised to spend our lives supporting just the 2 of us. When we'd see elderly couples with one pushing the other's wheelchair, we'd say that would be us someday. Even if one couldn't walk, the other would push them wherever they needed to go. I had my doubts after getting pregnant, but seeing his apparent joy made me gradually look forward to this baby's arrival. All those adorable baby clothes my brother bought made my heart melt. He was even more excited than Michael, I'm going to be the most doting uncle in the world. Before closing my eyes, my heart ached for my brother for a long time. I couldn't imagine how he would react reading those disgusting messages during his morning commute. When I opened my eyes after the procedure, everything felt surreal. Walking out, seeing sunlight scattered across the worn corridor, I felt hollow inside. Taking out my phone, there were countless missed calls. Michael was calling non-stop. I answered mechanically. "Where are you?" His voice was shaking. "Sarah, where the fuck are you?" When I didn't respond, he shouted in frustration. "At the hospital. Tell your mother the baby's gone." I hung up immediately, couldn't stand hearing his voice for one more second. Walking out while checking my phone, there were thousands of messages in the family chat. My brother Brian must have been the first to read the evidence. His first message tagged Michael, "You piece of shit, where are you right now?" No one rebuked him. After a while, Michael's mother appeared. "Sarah, are you at home? I'm coming over, please don't do anything rash." She kept tagging Michael, but he never responded. My mom, late to understand the situation, finally asked, "Who is this woman?" Brian completely lost it, sending one voice message after another. "Michael, you son of a bitch, you set me up with your mistress? How could you do this to my sister, to me?" Michael never showed up in the chat, leaving his poor mother to keep explaining and trying to calm everyone down. I scrolled to the bottom, feeling like I was watching drama that had nothing to do with me. My contact list was full of notification dots, everyone trying to reach me. At the hospital entrance, I saw Michael stumbling in. He grabbed me, his eyes bloodshot. "Sarah, where's the baby?" I said coldly, "Gone." The color drained from his face, his eyes wide, stammering incoherently. He stared at my stomach in disbelief. "Happy now?" I shoved the medical papers at him and got into the taxi, without looking back, slamming the door shut. As the car sped away, I saw his mother running up, her hair disheveled. Like a woman possessed, she smashed her thermos of soup over Michael's head. What a waste of good chicken soup. I called my brother, hearing the choke in his voice made my heart ache. "Come to the house, but try to control your strength when you get here." Brian grunted in agreement, then suddenly asked, "Sis, are you okay?" "I'm fine, but the baby's gone." "Fuck." He growled through gritted teeth. "Michael deserves to die." After hanging up, I forced myself to start packing. Looking at all the items we'd collected together, each one chosen by both of us. Right after graduation, Michael and I couldn't wait to get married. I truly believed we were soulmates who had found each other. We had a travel album full of photos from everywhere we'd been together. We'd promised to travel the world, standing side by side to see all its beauty. Now each photo felt like a joke, me leaning against him, him smiling so freely. He used to say, "Your name means smile, and I'll spend my life making sure you always do." Brian lived nearby and arrived quickly, freezing at the sight of the mess. Without a word, he pulled me up from the floor and held me. The little kid who used to tug at my clothes was now a head taller than me. He stroked my back gently, just like I used to comfort him. "Let it out, Sarah. Crying will make you feel better." His voice was thick with tears, his eyes red when he'd arrived. I knew he'd been crying already. The tears I'd held back all night finally broke free, until my head felt dizzy. A commotion of footsteps came from outside. As my senses returned, I looked up to see Brian wiping my tears. "Don't be scared, I'm here." His face hardened as he turned and threw a heavy punch at Michael's face. His mother screamed, stepping back timidly. Michael grunted, barely keeping his balance. "Where's Jessica? Where are you hiding her? Too scared to answer her phone?" Brian was breathing heavily, raising his fist again. His mother quickly stepped in front of Michael. "Brian, he's still your brother-in-law." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly, not for much longer. Michael stared at me in shock. I took out the divorce papers I'd prepared and put them on the table. "Michael, let's get divorced." He narrowed his eyes at me, more disgust than shock in his gaze. His mother was panicking, grabbing my arm. "Sarah, did you really terminate the pregnancy?" When I didn't respond, she burst into tears, beating her chest. "How could you? How could you just get rid of an innocent baby like that?" Brian pulled me away from her, his words harsh. "After all the disgusting things he's done, you still expect my sister to have his baby? Ask your son if he thought about my pregnant sister while he was fooling around." Michael suddenly shouted, "Enough." I found it darkly amusing that he still thought he had the right to be angry. "Ask me? Ask me what? Did anyone ask if I wanted this baby?" He laughed coldly. "Sarah, we agreed not to have children. You trapped me, and now you're blaming me? Without this baby, I wouldn't be like this." He took a deep breath, looking around. "I work every day to provide for us, come home and have to revolve around you. For a child I never wanted, look at what our life has become. When was the last time we traveled? The shopping cart is full of baby things. We used to go out on Valentine's Day, now you can barely walk down the hall. I can't even imagine what it'll be like after the birth. Waiting 15 years for them to grow up, my life would be over." He sighed, picking up the divorce papers. "Maybe it's for the best the baby's gone. I'll overlook this stunt you pulled if you let everything else go." I thought I was hearing things. How could anyone say something so absurd? Michael said, "I'll end things with her, we can go back to how we were." He spoke with such righteousness, as if he was making some grand concession. I went to the bed, pulled out a dusty box of condoms, and threw them at him. "Trapped you? Michael, do you think every woman is desperate to have your baby? Ask your mother where my pregnancy really came from." His mother started hitting him with her purse. "How did I give birth to something like you?" She was sobbing uncontrollably, cursing Michael for only thinking about his own pleasure. "Your father was diagnosed with terminal cancer after New Year's. If not for him, would I ever have done something like this?" She confessed to poking holes in the condoms, coming over every day to cook during that time. She'd been adding special ingredients to his tea and soup. Even the daily health supplements she made us drink were fertility herbs. Do you think it was easy for me? I tried everything to help Sarah get pregnant quickly. Michael stood there, frozen like a statue. I remembered what he'd said about me to Jessica. "I think she drugged me. I was so worked up back then, completely out of control." Jessica had laughed. "You seem pretty worked up now too." Those vulgar messages made me sick every time I thought of them. I shoved the pen into his hand. "Sign it." I couldn't find it in me to forgive him. I despised him from the depths of my soul. His hand trembled as he reached for the pen, then stopped mid-air. His mother collapsed to the floor, still crying. "How am I supposed to face your father?" Michael lowered his head, his eyes reddening, and after a long while muttered, "Sarah, let me think about this." Brian scoffed, immediately grabbing me and the suitcase, heading for the door. "Wait." Michael panicked, quickly grabbing my arm. "Please don't go. I know if you leave now, we won't have a chance to fix this." "Fix this?" Every word from his mouth seemed ridiculous to me. I peeled his fingers off my arm one by one. "Fix what? Now you have all the time in the world to be with her." In the car, Brian checked his phone. His hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel. He turned to look at me, dejected. How can someone be so shameless? On the screen was Jessica's message. "Since you know everything now, there's nothing left to say." I just love everything about him. I couldn't resist. Brian slammed the steering wheel. "Fuck, I can't take this." He tried calling Jessica, but got a busy signal. Clearly, she had blocked us completely. He couldn't hold back a tear, quickly wiping it away. I was such an idiot, even urged Mom to buy her engagement jewelry early. That's when I learned Jessica and Brian had already been discussing marriage. How could she act so innocent with me while doing this? Fuck. I gave a bitter smile, unable to find any words of comfort. Until it happens to you, you never expect to meet such terrible people, and we met two at once. No, I need to find her. Brian suddenly started the car, his cheeks puffed with anger. Mom's gold bracelet is still at her place, I won't let her keep it. The bracelet matched mine. Mom had prepared it in advance for her future daughter-in-law. In this situation, I didn't want to see Jessica. But I also didn't want my brother doing something rash in his emotional state. I had to go with him as the car sped through the streets. When we got to the apartment elevator, I couldn't help grabbing Brian's arm. If I remembered correctly, this was the marriage apartment Mom had bought for him. The door was wide open, with shouting coming from inside. Mom stood with her hands on her hips, finger nearly jabbing the face in front of her. I see her living here alone, in our apartment. Is this how you treat my children? Jessica cowered behind Michael, looking pitiful. Clothes were scattered everywhere, on the floor, on the sofa. Michael's face was swollen red, with bloody scratches from fingernails. His eyes were red-rimmed, lips pressed tight, unable to speak. His mother tried to hold my mom's arm, but was shoved away. Mom saw me, quickly glanced at my stomach, her eyes reddening. She rushed over and grabbed Jessica, dragging her toward the door. Get out, you shameless thing. Michael grabbed her hand. Mom. Don't call me Mom. You dare? My mom was incredibly strong when angry, even Brian couldn't match her. I watched as she grabbed Jessica by the hair, pushing her toward the door. Michael couldn't stop her. Jessica fell sideways, clutching the doorframe, crying so pitifully, looking more innocent than ever. I'm pregnant, Auntie, you can't push me like this. The words stunned everyone in the room. I froze too. She stood up tearfully, reaching toward Michael. I hadn't had the chance to tell you yet. Michael's eyes nearly popped out. How is that possible? We used protection. He glanced at me, suddenly stopping mid-sentence. Brian's knuckles were cracking. He suddenly rushed forward, grabbed Jessica's wrist, and forcefully pulled off the gold bracelet. Ow, ow, ah. Her eyes widened, tears springing from pain. Fucking disgusting. Brian strode over and started throwing all her clothes and luggage outside. I let out a long sigh, looking at Michael. How nice, you've got a replacement already. My divorce papers will come in handy now, unless you'd prefer jail time. Michael kept his head down for a long time, then looked up at me in panic. Sarah, it's not what you think. Mom had already hardened her face, pushing both his mother and Michael out the door. The door slammed shut with a bang. Mom's voice was thunderous. Divorce? Dream on. This is perfect, now we can charge him with bigamy. In the following days, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. His mother would call, then Michael, with Jessica's calls mixed in between. Perhaps because I rejected them all, Jessica went directly to my brother. When Brian came back, his face was livid talking about it. How shameless can she be? Asking me to convince you to get divorced? Michael's the one refusing to divorce, not you. Mom handed me some cut fruit, appearing completely composed. Your mother-in-law came to see me too. I didn't let her up. She was crying terribly, saying for her husband's sake, they need to keep this baby no matter what. It was all within my expectations, and I didn't feel as sad as I thought I would. It seemed after that sleepless night, I had already detached myself from this absurd drama. Mom told me his mother now wanted both the baby and to keep Michael out of jail. She kept going on about letting Michael leave the marriage with nothing. Money to make the problem go away. I thought under such pressure, it wouldn't take long for Michael to agree to divorce. But when he showed up again, he was trying to convince me to return. Sarah, please come home with me. He sneaked up to knock when he saw Mom had gone to the morning market. He looked terrible, disheveled hair, sunken eyes. Just sign the papers. If you leave with nothing, we'll be even. He suddenly looked up at me, eyes full of grief. How can we be even? How many years have we been together? I never wanted to divorce you. It had been many years. From classmates to lovers to spouses, I'd spent a third of my life with this person. I had tortured myself, wondering how someone could change so suddenly. But I quickly stopped that self-torment. The fault wasn't mine. When love dies, I accept it and know when to cut my losses. I looked at him steadily. You should have seen this coming the first time you stayed out all night. You were the one who tested our love, and sadly, it failed the test. He hung his head dejectedly, tears falling to the floor. I'll convince my mother. I only want you, not children. I couldn't help but laugh. Michael, I'm the one who doesn't want you anymore. The divorce papers were brought by his mother. She came with bags of things, all of which my mom threw out. His mother stood crying at the door, repeatedly apologizing to my mom. We've wronged Sarah and Brian terribly. I know you looked down on us, but I had no choice. I sat motionless on the sofa, as if everything she was saying had nothing to do with me anymore. She said she had to pressure Michael endlessly before he agreed to sign, but leaving everything behind was his idea. Sarah, he can't let you go. I forced him into this. It's my sin. I no longer wanted to consider his thoughts. What couldn't he let go of? When he was using his night runs as excuses to sleep with Jessica. When he was mocking my pregnancy with others. Where had he placed me in his heart? A month later, Mom booked me a flight and had Brian escort me. Go clear your head. Whatever you want, let your brother buy it for you. I wanted to say I was much better now, surprisingly calm. But seeing my brother's worried face, I couldn't refuse. We went to Yunnan, where I'd occasionally catch Brian staring at Jessica's social media. That block notification was like a scar across his heart, haunting him. I patted his shoulder, handing him a beer. Don't punish yourself for someone else's mistakes. Someone better will see your worth. Brian sighed, asking glumly, are children really that scary? What was that bastard Michael thinking? I thought seriously about this question, sometimes trying to find answers in our marriage. But eventually I gave up. The problem wasn't the baby, or marriage, it was the person. Whether it was a moment's impulse or long planned, the fault lies with the person. I've made peace with it. Trusting the wrong person isn't exactly rare in this world. After returning from Yunnan, I heard Michael and Jessica had both left their jobs. That's the polite way of putting it. The truth was they were fired, one after another, unable to handle the gossip and negative impact. With no property disputes, Michael and I agreed to meet for the divorce papers. When he arrived, Jessica got out of the car too. She held her head high with a victor's attitude, arm linked with Michael's. Michael frowned, quickly pulled his arm away, and walked straight inside. She ran after me and grabbed my arm. Sarah, we can't divorce like this. Michael stopped, saying impatiently, wait in the car. She refused. You don't even have a steady job now, why should you leave with nothing? She placed her hand on her stomach, stroking it gently, tilting her head at me. You're just one person, what expenses do you have? Unlike us, we'll need money for everything soon. I nodded. The car, house, savings, we did earn quite a bit over the years. She glanced at me, her voice softening. Michael worked so hard, you wouldn't want him to have nothing in his middle age, right? How is that my concern? I looked at her, amused. Whether it's hard or not, that's between you two now. She was speechless with anger, tried to grab me again, but I smoothly avoided her. Successfully getting the divorce certificate, Michael stared at the official seal, his fingers trembling as he traced it. A tear dropped onto the paper, and he looked up at me dejectedly. Sarah, how did we end up here? I paused. Remember that day? I gave you a chance. I never liked chicken soup, but I spent hours making it, thinking if it was too late, you wouldn't go out. But you couldn't wait to leave. That was the last chance I gave you. I ended my leave and returned to work early. Life seemed to regain its former peace, socializing in my free time, making new friends. Some young women noticed when Brian came to deliver things to me, blushing as they asked about him. Soon after, Mom mentioned Brian was having better luck in love. I had a good impression of that girl, cheerful and graceful. Watching them date, I saw my brother becoming more spirited day by day. With all contact cut off, Michael seemed to vanish from my world. Months later, Mom suddenly brought up his name at dinner with interest. Old Zhang from the supermarket saw him, buying lots of instant noodles alone. I asked around, heard he's renting a place by himself. That woman's living with his parents, quite pregnant now, but Michael refuses to marry her. Brian stood up, putting down his bowl. I'm done. He left without a word, face dark. Mom glanced at me carefully. Has that heartless man tried to find you? I thought back, he had, about a week ago. That day after work, he was waiting outside our office building. I saw him immediately, but ignored him. He kept following nervously until I couldn't stand it anymore, and stopped. He called out timidly from behind, "Honey. We're divorced, Michael." He approached with his head down, so thin, his shadow had shrunk considerably. He took out our big photo album from his backpack. Keep this as a memento? I didn't take it, nothing worth remembering. I can barely recall you, or those years anymore. His hands trembled holding the album. I'm so sorry. Every day I wonder how I lost you. I failed to keep you smiling every day. I thought it would all pass, that as long as you were in my heart, you'd forgive me. I walked around him without looking back. When either body or soul loses its way, there's no finding the way home. I never expected Jessica would show up at our home. When Brian opened the door and saw her, he immediately tried to close it, but she blocked it. Brian, please don't reject me. I was bringing out soup when I heard this, nearly dropping the bowl. Jessica was covered in mud, wearing only one shoe, her belly now very large. Seeing me, she avoided my gaze nervously. I walked over. What's going on? Wrong door? She stammered, finally managing to speak. The baby, there was a mistake. It's not Michael's. I almost laughed, but seeing Brian's livid face, I held it back. Michael's mother took me for a DNA test. It didn't match. She was crying miserably, constantly wiping tears with her hand. In just a few months, she'd gained weight significantly, her unkempt appearance making her look even more pathetic. Brian, I was wrong, but please, for the baby's sake, could you forgive me? I'm too far along for termination now. Brian's fist clenched and unclenched, scoffing quietly. I'm not a garbage collector. Mom poked her head out from the kitchen. We're not royalty-needing heirs, we don't take in women and children of unknown origin. What are you two standing there for? Help set the table, guests will be here soon. Jessica tried to say more, but Brian coldly shut the door. Days later, my former mother-in-law sent a mediator. Mom impatiently cut them off as soon as they started. I'm sick of their drama. If you're here about my daughter remarrying, our friendship ends here. What sane person would push their daughter back into a fire? The mediator was effectively silenced. Months later, I heard about Michael through mutual friends. Poor guy's had it rough. Right after his father's funeral, he was diagnosed with late-stage cancer. He's getting chemotherapy, but it's not working well. Heard his mom sold their house for his treatment. Barely recognized him at the hospital. Bald, extremely thin. Sarah, you probably wouldn't recognize him either. I remembered the last time I saw him, when he came to return some old belongings. A full suitcase stood beside him as he stood against the sunlight, watching me. He stepped forward, reached for me but stopped. These past months, I revisited all the places we went together. There are still so many we never got to see. His voice was faint. Don't know if I'll have the chance. You used to love buying local specialties everywhere we went. I bought some for you. I didn't take them, that was the past. I only look forward now. He lowered his head silently, saying nothing more. 6 months later, I saw his obituary photo on social media. He looked like a stranger in the photo, his cheeks sunken from extreme weight loss. In the memorial hall, only his elderly mother, white-haired parent burying her black-haired child. I closed my phone and looked up at the couple on stage. Among the cheers, Brian blushed as he kissed his bride. My phone pushed a news notification. Unidentified female body found months ago, confirmed as local woman surnamed Shin. 9 months pregnant at time of death. Woman suffered anesthesia accident during illegal procedure at underground clinic. Unlicensed practitioner confessed to collaborating with XXX and failing to provide timely aid, then disposing of body in river to cover up incident. The blurry photo looked familiar. Just as I was about to zoom in, something fell from above. I nearly dropped my phone in surprise. The bouquet I caught made me pause. The shy bride on stage smiled at me. "Sister, happiness will find you next." Sunlight filtered through the summer leaves onto the garden's stone path, creating shimmering patterns. As if happiness had finally taken shape.